Once you've built your base, the first task is always to light it. A dark home is no good to the struggling exile, but how do we light builds effectively? Today I'm going to be showing you how to light your builds in Conan Exiles, including atmospheric lighting, and how to get the most out of your materials. So without further ado, let's get started. The main theory of lighting is of course making a building traversable. The core purpose of those braziers and lamps is to improve visibility and provide warmth, and the perfect lighting leaves everything visible without blinding the occupant. For most general purpose builds like your bases and homes, your lighting should be fairly uniform throughout the build to maximise visibility, but otherwise shouldn't really stand out too much. Of course this rule can be broken, but we'll touch on that later. It's also really important to know how light interacts with the environment. Generally, it works pretty much as you'd expect it to, though it does somewhat ignore walls and other building pieces and can spill out. This can create some admittedly kind of ugly effects, but you can also use it to light the exterior, whilst providing overflow light to the interior, which you will see later. Learning how lighting interacts with the environment is one of those things that comes with experience, but it is extremely invaluable to know. To begin to understand effective lighting, it's important to know the main types of lighting. I typically break lighting items down into three categories, which I'll show you now. Key lights are your main lighting source that have the widest light radius. This category includes braziers, Turanian lamps, standing torches, etc. Key lights are easy to come by in both the base game and the DLCs, and they will carry most of the work in lighting your build. Do also remember that with freestanding light sources, like standing torches, the radius of the light is not a circle, it's actually a sphere, so you will get a bit of overspill to the floor above or below. Side lights are a sort of middle ground, either having a smaller radius or a more directional light. This category includes wall-mounted torches and a couple of the braziers. There aren't many side lights, wall-mounted sources are generally the main avenue, and they're used to fill gaps in your lighting that key lights would perhaps overlight, or to direct light in a certain direction without much overspill. Finally, minimal lights have an incredibly small or no lighting radius. This includes small placeables like candles and certain lamps. Minimal lights are generally used for atmosphere or highlights, but are in no way enough to carry lighting a small space, let alone a room or a full house. So now that we know the lighting types, let's look into how to make livable lighting. This is your most general purpose lighting that will be applicable to almost all of your builds. Let's take a look at this example house here. It's nothing too fancy, but it is very easy to accidentally overdo the light. I generally follow the rule of 1 or 2 key lights per room, unless of course it's a large room. This build has 4 main rooms, 3 on the ground floor and 1 on the top, so we're going to go with 1 key light per room. I also place 2 key lights either side of the door on the outside, which will fill in the shadows near the door and overspill backwards to provide some lighting to the interior. This ends up lighting the build pretty well, but there are still some parts with shadows that are a little too harsh. Therefore I'm going to use a side light in the alcove beneath the stairs, and in the small alcove on the right side. Finally, with all our decorations in place, this is where we can use our minimal lights. I find the best places for these are on tables or other decorations you want to bring attention to, or to just make more visually interesting. The oil lamp is a personal favourite of mine, which I believe is from the Age of Sorcery Chapter 1 Battle Pass, but candles and other minimal lights should work fine. Minimal lights are really easily overblown, so once you've got all your lighting fixtures in place, you may wish to remove some of your side or even your key lights to make sure the lighting is balanced and the right things stand out. Compared to the unlit iteration of this build, this lighting is much more effective. Rather than just throwing braziers everywhere, we can build effective lighting with careful and considered placement of a few different light sources to not only save on resources, but to give the build a balanced and uniform illumination that lends itself well to comfort and visibility. Sometimes you might be building something that doesn't need a uniform and visibility friendly lighting. If you're building a dungeon, or in this case a hidden temple, you'll want things to be atmospheric. This is where we kind of break the initial rules we mentioned before, and where deliberate underlighting and coloured lights come in. There are of course the coloured torches from the recent battle passes, but radium torches from the base game can take all manner of dyes. Some are admittedly more effective than others, and radium might not always fit the intended vibe of the build you're going for, but they're a very good option. Glowing torches and witchfire torches are also really good alternative options. Coloured lighting and deliberate underlighting are your best friends when trying to build atmosphere. Of course, you can build atmosphere with regular lights too, but building atmosphere is where you typically sacrifice the core rules of comfort and visibility. It can take some practice to get the proper balance for this, especially when dealing with lighting overflow, which is especially a problem with coloured lighting, but you can however use that to your advantage by lighting things from underneath, especially underneath false floors to give something a bit of indirect light. This is especially useful if you play on PC and you have the Pippy mod, as the move feature gives you so much more flexibility. It's rare you'll find yourself needing to light something atmospherically, especially if you're just a regular PvE builder, but if you're building something more extravagant, or you're building something based on roleplay, atmospheric lighting is a skill that can absolutely make or break a build. Something I've also touched on before is how lighting interacts with materials. Specifically, this results in an effect that I refer to as tonal uprising, in that certain light sources can bring out different tones in building materials. There are some pretty obvious interactions, like how glowing and white torches suppress the warm tones of wood and bring out the neutrals, but there are other, more interesting interactions. A really good example is terrain. On its own, the walls are nice enough, however they are incredibly flexible with lighting. White lighting gives you a very plain look that accentuates the details without much tonal uprising of the blacks, the whites, or the golds. Warm lighting suppresses the density of the black tones whilst elevating the golds, and blue suppresses the gold whilst making the black tones look a little lighter, giving the material a bit more of an eerie vibe. There's a lot of experimentation here that goes into these things. Another obvious example is white light helping to elevate the white marble of Argosian or Aquilonian, which is invaluable for making builds using those materials literally and figuratively shine. There are a ton of interactions between materials and lighting, too many to list here, but it is worth experimenting with lighting and different materials to see what sort of tones you can bring out of different building pieces. The final point I'd like to touch on is natural lighting. Due to how fast light moves, natural lighting isn't necessarily the most reliable form of providing illumination to your build. However, you can design your build to sit across the travel line of the sun or the moon. In the morning and the evening, this can provide some nice god rays through your windows, and a nice bit of natural light too. Again, it should not be your main form of lighting, but it can help to elevate a build, especially more prestigious ones like temples and palaces. This interacts particularly nicely with real windows, which if you don't know how to do that, there is a card up in the top right now, you can see that video, and of course it also interacts really nicely with storm glass windows. To wrap things up, lighting your build practically is pretty simple. Key lights carry the main body of the lighting, with side and minimal lights helping to fill gaps created by the key lights. Atmospheric lighting is a much more subjective process that is highly dependent on your vision for the build, and it's important to know how lighting interacts with materials so you know how to create the atmosphere you want and how to draw out certain tones and colours from different material sets. When we think of building and decorating in Conan, we often think of placing down walls and roofs and chairs and tables, but lighting is just as important. Good lighting is the foundation of an effective design, and mastery of lighting is one of the most important skills you can learn. Thank you for watching. This is a guide I've been considering for a while now. Some of this information is a bit difficult to explain properly, as it's part of a process that does take a long time to learn. Nevertheless, I hope this guide has taught you something valuable about lighting your builds. If you enjoyed that video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. The links to my Twitter, Discord, Patreon and various sponsored discounts are also available in the description below. As always, if you have suggestions for future content you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to become a member of the Coffee Cult by joining our Discord, and if you'd like to support the channel further, become an esteemed Coffee Cultist by joining us over on Patreon. As a patron, you'll get sneak peeks of new videos before they're uploaded, full-size blueprints, wallpapers in both 1080p and 4K resolutions, Discord roles and more. On that note, a massive thanks to all of our esteemed Coffee Cultists on screen now for continuing to support the channel. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.